Introduction is going to be a little bit short because I just met her this evening. I was impressed with what she told us about herself. She's the archaeological, what would you call it? The specialist for the TVA, Tennessee Valley Authority, and has been with them some years. But the thing that she's going to talk about tonight is this thing called the Thousand Eyes program. TVA has something like 12,000 archaeological sites that they know about. There's probably that many more they haven't found yet. But the idea is to get people, the public, to be aware of them as cultural resources and historic resources and spiritual resources in some cases. And so we're trying to take care of these and get the public aware of what's there, so that if you're out there on the TVA land and you see somebody tearing up a site, you can call a cop. You know, the TVA has cops that will come lock them up. The Forest Service does too, and I worked with them for a number of years too. Okay, I think that's probably enough said, and you can talk about what you want to say about yourself from now on. How's that?
Good evening. Thank you guys for having me here today. I am not one to talk about myself, so that probably was enough introduction. But my name is Erin Dunsmore, and I'm an archaeological specialist at TVA. I'm not the only archaeological specialist. There's actually quite a few archaeologists that we have, including Kenny's husband, Mike, on staff. We have about, I think, 30 of them now. We got a pretty good sized program in place. So I have been there the longest. I've been there for 23 years, and that's a long time in the federal system for archaeologists. So I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about TVA and how we manage archaeological sites, and ultimately how we work with the public and the communities with our Thousand Eyes program. And I want to give you a little bit of background first about what we do and why we do it. Is anybody familiar with TVA? Some of you are, I know, yeah. But if you're not familiar with TVA, okay, well, hopefully that helps. Look at me back.
I think you can use the buttons now. I just have to click onto the PowerPoint first.
Okay,
you should be set.
Okay,
If it doesn't work again, I'll figure it out.
So TVA, the Tennessee Valley Authority, is a public power company. We are not federally funded, but we are a federal agency that was established in 1933 to produce power and maintain the river system, the Tennessee River, for flood control and navigation, and then provide economic development benefits in the Tennessee Valley. So we have a large purpose that includes managing the land that was purchased in the 1930s to be considered federal land. So even though we don't get federal funding anymore, we still have the responsibilities to protect federal land that, you know, public land, just like Forest Service land, Park Service land, BLM land, all the different other federal agencies. So on our property, we have 29 hydro facilities. They're all listed on the National Register of Historic Places because we were established very early on to provide power to the Tennessee Valley, which didn't have power. So we're very significant historically for that purpose. We also have a number of look at my notes, because this part I'm not really that familiar with. The fossil plants, we have a number of fossil plants. We have 3 nuclear plants as well to produce power for the Tennessee Valley. And as Jack said, we have over 12,500 archaeological sites that are recorded on our property, which is about 300,000 acres of land, which in the grand scheme of things is very tiny compared to most federal agencies. I was telling somebody earlier that if you line up our land on the map of the United States with all the federal agencies' land, you can't even see us. But we own land all along the Tennessee River Valley. And so because of that, you know, what do people need to survive? You guys know this, your archaeology students are interested in archaeology, you got to have water, right? So We have a very high density of archaeological sites for the small amount of public land that we have. We've surveyed about a third of our land, and we have about 12,500 sites reported. So probably somewhere around 20,000 sites, I would say. Just guessing on that 300,000 acres of land total. A lot of them are inundated because we did inundate a lot of our lands when we built the reservoirs to run our hydro facilities, but we also still have that 300,000 acres land is above pool. There's actually, I think, 470,000 acres of land below. So, and that's 12,500, not including all of the sites that are underneath that water. So quite a bit of archaeological sites that we have our responsibility to manage. We have a majority of our sites are related to Native American occupation in the Tennessee Valley. I don't know that percentage, unfortunately, but probably the highest majority of those are Native American. But we also have Civil War sites. We have quite a few towns that were inundated as a result of our reservoir construction, where people had to move. You guys may be familiar with Tellico, or one of our more recent ones, where we had to remove people in the 1960s. That's a lot of tension. We had to do that for all of our reservoirs throughout the years. So there's a lot of communities that we had to flood. So there's a lot of historic sites that are also located on our inundated lands. We have archaeological collections at over 15 repositories that are not only in the Southeast. We have stuff in Michigan, we have stuff in Arizona. The archaeology history at TVA is very significant because we were doing archaeological excavations in 1933, back long before all the laws were passed that required agencies to do that. And that was because the local universities came to TVA and said, hey, you're going to flood a lot of really important archaeological sites. And they partnered with TVA, and they got money from the Works Progress Administration and other federal entities at that time to do a lot of excavations. Many years before it is now legally required to do so with the impact sites. So we have a very long history of doing archaeology at TVA. As a result, have a very large archaeological collection. We have a lot of, unfortunately, Native American ancestors that were excavated during the 1930s and 40s that were from those excavations that we're still working with tribes to repatriate, which is a requirement of federal law. And we're working to get those ancestors returned to the ground where they belong. So TVA also has a very big historic collection where we've collected historic artifacts and things such as old toasters, all sorts of really cool gadgets and things that are related to the electrification of the Tennessee Valley. And those are kind of neat. You have to go into a TVA building, which most of them are closed now, to see some of those things. But there's a pretty substantial historic collection that we also maintain, which is also part of our cultural resource responsibility. Yay! Right. So as a federal agency, some of you guys may be familiar with this. The students in the room probably have heard some of these laws before. There are a large number of laws, regulations, and presidential memoranda and executive orders that we're responsible for complying with as a federal agency. There's a really long list. I'm not going to go into great detail about each one of these. I'm going to highlight some of the work that we do that's related to all of this here shortly. Oh, by the way, if I ever talk about anything that somebody's not sure of, please feel free to raise your hand and ask a question. I'm usually very informal and I don't want to be interrupted, so feel free to speak up if I say something that you're not sure about. So I want to talk about two of these laws specifically, and one of those is the National Historic Preservation Act, which is huge, from 1966. And that establishes agencies have to have what they call preservation programs in place, which require them to identify all the historic properties that are located on their land. Historic properties can include not only archaeological sites, but also historic buildings, historic structures, historic sites, and historic items. Like I mentioned, that historic collection that we have, all of those things are things that fall under our preservation program. It also requires us to evaluate and nominate sites to the National Register of Historic Places, which is the nation's list of historically significant properties that are considered significant either locally, regionally, or nationally. And we're supposed to coordinate all of these activities that we do with our state historic preservation offices, as well as federally recognized tribes. I'm gonna talk a little bit more about our tribal partnerships in just a minute. Few other things, which we have a designated federal preservation officer for the agency that's responsible for all of these activities. We're supposed to minimize impacts to national historic landmarks, which we only have one, and it's Wilson Dam in North Alabama. And the big thing is we're supposed to consider the effects that anything that we do will have on historic properties. And that's Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act. And for the students out there, if you end up going in archaeology, a huge percentage of you will end up doing this for the rest of your life. So this is something you probably want to learn about. And that's where federal agencies have the responsibility to consider the impacts that anything that they do, such as a permit, a license, building a nuclear plant, maintaining a transmission line for us, anything like that will have on historic properties. And so a big part of what archaeology is like surveying and evaluating and doing data recovery on projects that are going to be impacted by federal projects. So that's a big part of why I say we had 30 plus archaeologists. Most of them do that. I'm gonna bust into your water. I forgot my water in my car, and Katie was very nice not to give me hers. All right. The second law I want to highlight is the Archaeological Resource Protection Act, which is most of what I do in my job. And ARPA, which is what it's well known as, some of you guys are probably familiar with it, makes it illegal to excavate, remove, damage, or vandalize or destroy archaeological resources on public lands. It requires agencies to give permits for any archaeological work that may occur on that public land. It protects any information on archaeological resources that are maintained by the agency, which means you can't disclose that information to the public. So if somebody submits a FOIA request and wants to know all the locations of all the archaeological sites on TVA land, ARPA exempts that. We don't have to disclose that information. And so why is that?
To avoid vandalism. Yeah.
What's one of the biggest impacts to site besides development? What's one of the biggest impacts to archaeological sites that we see on public lands on anywhere? Looting. Looting is still a huge problem. It also requires agencies to have public outreach programs. And as the title of my presentation I'm going to talk about later, our Thousand Eyes program was established in 2003 to go out into the communities and make them aware of why we're protecting these sites. Because it's important not just to go out and enforce the law and go out and arrest people, which we do get to do. That's fun. But it's also important for us to go out and tell them why. You know, people need to understand, people need to have a greater appreciation for archaeological resources. And archaeologists don't always do that and go out into the public and talk about these things. And this is why this program is great. And I was really happy to come here today because this is public archaeology at its finest. And I'm very supportive of groups like this and appreciate the fact that you guys have one. Because our greatest support that we have as federal agencies is the communities. Is going out and getting the communities to understand why it's important to protect these sites and getting your all support in doing that. So thank you guys for being here tonight and being a part of this group, because it's really important to the future of our national heritage. And lastly, ARPA, but also actually it requires a whole lot of other things, but I just highlighted the high points of ARPA, but it requires us to go out and survey our lands for significant archaeological sites. So we have a requirement to go out and identify where all those important places are and protect them and manage them in a way that ensures that they're not getting looted, that they're not getting damaged by erosion, things like that. So ARPA is a really big law for federal agencies in the management of archaeological sites on public lands. Any questions? All right. So, as I mentioned earlier, archaeological sites still, unfortunately, are being impacted on a daily basis by a number of different things. You have impacts from animal activity. Groundhogs are terrible. Birds will build nests in the shoreline. There's all sorts of natural things that impact sites. You have erosion. You maintain federal land along the river system. Erosion is just a daily thing for us. Unfortunately, it's natural. Plus we have a man-made river system. So the river fluctuates, and so there's impacts from that as well. Non-permitted activities. You know, TVA requires that anybody comes in along the river gets a permit for anything they're going to build, whether that be a boat dock, a launching ramp, putting in riprap, anything. It requires a permit under TVA, the TVA Act. A lot of times people do that without getting a permit, and sites are impacted. Artifact removal, one of the biggest impacts we have is just surface collection. People going out on our property and picking things up, taking them home. And unfortunately, we still have a very big problem with looting. People going and digging out sites. This is a hole on a site in North Alabama. That's me standing in the hole. The hole actually got about twice that size before we were able to protect the sites, where somebody was just going in and just digging in graves, desecrating Native American graves to get the artifacts that are found in those graves. It happens every day. It's still a huge problem. Some regions are worse than others. I can't say North Georgia is one of our worst areas, but maybe North Alabama is, which is where I live. So it's still a huge problem that we have, that we're still tackling every day. So it's a big part of what my job is at TVA. So to give you some examples of some looted sites, this is a rock shelter that's located in North Alabama. Said I didn't need a pointer, but the ground surface is right here. Basically from this rock ledge over to here, you couldn't even tell there was a rock shelter there. All of that excavation that you see in this photo was done by looters. There's no archaeological excavations, professional excavations done at this site. All done by looting. Burials have been found in the screens that they were using. There's an ongoing, you can see the screens and the shovels, their boots, the left gloves, their artifacts usually along the ledge. Huge problem. It was located in a very remote slough on the Tennessee River. So it was very difficult to access. We put cameras up. And within 2 hours of putting the cameras up, the cameras got stolen, and this was in the middle of the night. And so we knew that the land that we were crossing to access this site, there was a leak. Somebody was giving out information. So we had to access it by water, which took about an hour and a half to get in. So it's a huge problem. Last year, I'm happy to say we filled it with concrete, and people would have a lot harder time getting in there. But that's really sad that we had to do that. That we had to go to those measures to stop people from digging up graves. Here you see a historic cemetery that's just been vandalized. It's not just Native American sites that people are impacting. They're going in and tearing up European graves as well. On the right is the old Civil War site where an individual was going in and diving in the river and pulling up Civil War artifacts. He was actually bringing in members of the public, having them pay to go on diving expeditions, and they were able to take artifacts home with them as a part of their prize for their expedition. He served 2.5 years in prison, I'm happy to say. We did catch him, but it's a huge problem. So part of our responsibility A part of our archaeological site management responsibility under ARPA is to monitor and protect these sites. I'm going to talk a little about each one of these programs, enforce the law, and to conduct outreach. So I'm going to talk about each one of those individually. Our monitoring program, as I said, we have 12,500 archaeological sites, and even with 30 archaeologists, even if all 30 of those archaeologists were able to go out and do monitoring, it's still not enough to see 12,500 sites every year. So we'll pick about 50 to 100 sites a year to go out and check. We prioritize those in areas where we know there's looting problems, we know there's erosion problems. We go out in the wintertime when our reservoirs are dropped. TVA manages the river system for the rainy season, so all of our reservoirs go down in the wintertime for that flood capacity. And so when those reservoirs are down, we'll go out and keep an eye on those sites. That's our busy season. We go out and we check these sites pretty regularly, look for things like natural impacts, erosion, looting. You'll see Katie, my volunteer, she's documenting all this stuff. We've recently got a new cultural resource management system where we can enter that stuff in the field into our iPads and get back to the office and upload it into the system and keep up with all of the data that we have. And we prioritize these sites in terms of their need for protection. Some of them, erosion is just the biggest impact that they see. Unfortunately, when a site is subjected to erosion along the river, archaeological features are then exposed. You get shell middens, you get burials, you get all sorts of things that are exposed. And then you have people going out on the river. You see a big shell midden, it then attracts people. They go in, they start digging, they start undercutting that bank. What happens when you undercut a bank? Makes the erosion problem worse. So it's this cyclical cycle that just damages that site more and more every year. So we have to prioritize those sites. Any site that has a burial that's exposed gets highest priority. We want to protect any remains that may be impacted by either looting or erosion. We work with TVA police to do monitoring and patrols on those sites that are most vulnerable. And then every quarter we coordinate our findings with the tribes. So I'm going to talk in a minute about our partnership with the tribes. Recently, we have been trying to apply the use of LiDAR in our monitoring efforts because we have one island in North Alabama. It's called 7 Mile Island, and it's literally 7 miles long. May not be that long after inundation, but it took us about 4 trips, 4 or 5 archaeologists, like weeks to walk the entire length of that island. And it took a LiDAR with, or a drone with a LiDAR mounted on it, a half a day to fly that whole island. So, I mean, it's amazing technology. And if we can figure out how to look at the data and look at the different types of readings that you see on the LiDAR, you see this area in the middle of this, just doesn't look like much. It just looks a little lumpy, but we were able to cross-reference that with our in the field, like boots on the ground data. And we know that that is what looting looks like, extensive looting looks like on the ground. So when we fly over and test this stuff with data that we know we have, we can figure out what to look for in that LiDAR data, and we know where to focus in on when we go out in the field, and we actually can spend, we can focus our efforts in on those places that look like this. So it's going to save us a lot of time. We fortunately have a group of folks in TVA who have the equipment and are willing to do this and support our team. So we've been experimenting with that and doing more and more of it every year to try to support that our effort, because everywhere you go, there's not enough people to do these jobs. There's not enough archaeologists. There's not enough resources out there to do it all. So technology has been really, really helpful in helping saving us time. So when we do have sites that need to be protected, we have a very, very robust protection program that prioritizes those sites with these sensitive resources, like I mentioned, where we have burials that are eroding out of the bank. We spend quite a bit of money every year doing shoreline stabilization with riprap. This is a barge company that we use to install that riprap from the river so that we don't have to do any bank shaping. We don't have to impact the site any further. Just push back the vegetation and lay the rock on top of it, so any sensitive features that are in the bank don't get impacted any further than they already have been. We've been able to put anywhere from 2,000 to 6,000 feet of riprap a year on our shorelines to protect these archaeological sites. And it doesn't just stop the looting problem, it just stops the erosion problem, and it's protecting these sites for the future. So it's one of our most expensive methods, but it's also one of the most long-term as far as preserving these sites for the future. We've also been doing quite a bit of signage. These are our signs here. We put signs at every point of access on TVA land, whether that be a launching ramp, a trailhead, any point where somebody's accessing public land, just to put them on notice that it is against the law to impact archaeological sites. And the benefit of that is if somebody gets caught digging in a site and they walk past one of these signs, it helps in a court case if the judge asks, well, did he know? Even though ARPA is it does not require you to prove that they knew that it was wrong. This sign right here will help it because the judge still questions that. It's a general intent crime. But a lot of judges expect you to prove specific intent if you're familiar with the judicial system. So we put in fencing, we've done some cave gating. Cave gating is not very effective in all cases because evidently when you put a cave gate up, people think there's gold in there or crystal skulls and they want to break into it. And so people end up breaking into it. So we don't do as much cave gating as we used to. And then if we see a situation where a site needs to be further monitored or further patrolled, we'll put that up on the list so that we'll either go visit it multiple times a year, at least once a year, or we'll go to it more frequently until we can get it protected. And unfortunately, recently, we've had to go to extreme measures because we've had several sites that people have gone in and repeatedly desecrated. It didn't matter if we've even caught people, if we put people in jail, people are continually going in them and digging up graves. And for those of you guys who are familiar, there's a law, the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, which protects Native American graves on public land. Every time we have to deal with a grave that's been desecrated on public land, we have to talk to the tribes. And the tribes get very upset every time you go to them and say, I'm sorry, one of your ancestors has been dug up. When you have to go back and tell them that like 10 times from one site, they get very angry, understandably. So we've had to go to some extreme measures with some of our sites. We physically had to cap them. This is an open air site on the river. This has got metal mesh on it, and then it's got rock on top of it. It's about 2 feet of heavy duty riprap. Is this going to keep somebody out of it forever? No. This is a deterrent. Somebody's going to try to go back in this site again in the future. People are that committed to it. The site on the right is a cave located in North Alabama. It was very well known. It had been impacted over and over and over again. I think 17 graves had been damaged in that site. We ended up putting 4 barriers inside that cave to keep people out of it. 4 concrete walls with metal and concrete and a heavier duty concrete, more metal. And this is completely excessive, but this is a very, very sensitive site to the tribes because a lot of burials came out of this site, and we had to do something because we could not stop the people from going inside it. So,
excuse me, what was the tribe's reaction? Were they could see you were trying to make an effort to protect the site, but was that sufficient for what they were looking for?
This was.
Yeah, okay.
But before that, it had been an archaeological field school up until 2002, when we closed the field school to protect the remaining graves in the site. There were over 80-something burials that had been excavated by the field school, which was already a sensitive topic for the tribes. They didn't
like that.
They didn't like that. So we stopped the field school, we closed it down. We did not at the time put a very heavy duty gate on the outside. It was made out of wrought iron metal. It got broken into 2007 by kids, like teenagers. They were digging in a grave underneath a rotten platform in a very dangerous setting. You can't prosecute children under ARPA, by the way. It's like, no, you have to prosecute them as an adult, and finding a judge who's gonna say a 15-year-old is an adult is not gonna happen for an ARPA violation. Maybe for capital crime or murder or something, but it's not gonna happen for an ARPA violation. So we weren't able to prosecute them. So we made plans. It took a couple of years. We put an angle iron gate in, like a heavier duty metal. We made the choice at the time to not dig into the deposits to get the gate to go to all levels of bedrock in the site, because we didn't want to impact burials. Learned my lesson there. That was a poor choice because they figured out where that weak spot was in the gate. They dug into it, impacted 7 graves. We fixed that gate. Somebody got in there I think 3 times after that. And the last time I was actually with one of the tribal representatives working on a project, I was back in the back of the cave. We didn't take any of the burials out of the cave when they've been damaged by the looting because the tribes don't want us to. We put them in the very back and reburied them. Somebody had a shovel and a hole next to the place where I reburied them. And I was like, that's it, they're all coming out. I took everything out of the cave. The tribes were very upset. They were very angry because they said, and I quote, TVA built Fontana Dam in 6 months, something like that. Why can't they protect this cave? We have a team of engineers, we have all these smart people in this agency. Why can't we find some way to protect this cave? So we brought in all the experts across the agency, construction managers, engineers, people to help us, because it's not in an easy spot. You can't just drive a truck up to this cave. It's like in the back of a really remote location. So we were able to get barges back in the back of the slough with concrete pumps, bags of concrete, metal mesh rolls, and it took us I want to say about a month. But we closed it off. And then I think the tribe said for the first time they felt good about something. But it took a lot of effort and a lot of money. So it's unfortunate that we have to go to those extremes and spend that much money to stop this problem, which I'm leaning in towards the importance of public outreach and education. If you haven't figured that out yet, the importance of us working in the communities to stop this problem, because our best long-term solution is education and outreach and stopping the looting problem altogether, making it no longer publicly acceptable to do this type of activity. Because right now, in some of these communities, it's socially acceptable to go here and do this kind of thing. Still today.
Which tribe were you dealing with?
In this location, we deal with 16 tribes. There's the Chickasaw, the Choctaw, the Cherokee, the Creek, Muskogee Creek. There's several different Creek tribes, several different Cherokee tribes. So there's 16 tribes total.
Did all of them have input on this particular site?
Absolutely. Yes, they did.
So they don't really know who these ancestors are.
No, this site is very old. It's the remains in this site are, I think, 7,000 years old. Middle Archaic. Yeah. So it's really old. There isn't a directly related tribe. So we dealt with all 16 tribes, and they were all on the same page with stopping this looting problem. I mean, one thing that they are all in agreement on is that the looting is the worst thing that's going on our property. ARPA enforcement, protection of Native American ancestral remains is very, very top of their list. And they're very much still connected. So I'm going to get to this in a minute, but the tribes that live in the Southeast, for those of you guys who haven't worked with them that often, are still very connected to their ancestral lands. They still come back to their homelands. In their belief system, they are still connected to their ancestors. So they consider the people even this old to be their family members, their connected ancestors. So they still have ties to it, still very personal to them. So it would be like somebody going into one of our grandmothers or great grandfathers' cemeteries and digging up their grave. It's the same thing for them. They still have those connections and those ties, because in their culture, they're responsible for taking care of their ancestors. It's a part of their belief system to take care of the people who came before them. And so they feel like an obligation to protect these people. So it's very personal to them, even when it's even if it's a long time ago. So yeah, they were very upset about that cave being repeatedly damaged. So that's what it took to get, a lot of people at the table to have that conversation, to get the funding that it took to close that site up, because it was not cheap. So. but those are good questions. Any more questions?
Well, I do, before you move on, why was TVA excavating graves?
TVA. It wasn't universities, but they did allow it. It started in the 80s. And it occurred from, I think, 1988 until 2002. As part of the archaeological excavations. They did consultation at the time, but this was at a time when we were not doing meaningful consultation with the tribes. We've learned a lot since then, what meaningful consultation means, sitting down at the table, talking face to face, having those conversations. And that's when in 2002, when we did close down the field school and stop the excavations. So, and you know, work to get those remains back into the back to the site, back where they belong. So it's the same. The field of archaeology has evolved over the years. Excavation of graves, unfortunately, was an acceptable practice for a long time. It was well past the passage of NAGPRO when people realized that it was, you know, harmful and inappropriate. And now it's only done when TVA excavates a grave. Now it's because that grave is going to be impacted, and we'll do an immediate reburial. So it doesn't happen anymore. That's a good question. It's a fair question.
Thank you.
Any more? All right, so I mentioned ARPA enforcement, where ARPA makes it illegal to remove, damage, excavate, alter, deface, vandalize archaeological sites. There are both criminal and civil penalties for violations of this law. Criminally, if a person does over $500 worth of damage, it can be considered a felony. And $500 worth of damage, the way the law is calculated, could be any amount of damage. Is a very low threshold for a felony offense. Unfortunately, still very hard to charge somebody with a felony, because with the current state of our judicial system, there's a lot of crime going on. And when you've got, you know, drugs and murder and you know, all sorts of rape, all things like that going on, a case like this is not always easy to get a U.S. attorney to take. So we still struggle with that unless it's a really egregious case that involves human remains, and then they're usually willing to take it on as a felony case, which is a good thing. But any violation over $500 could be charged, that person could be charged with felony, which is a good thing. Just got a long way to go to work with our judicial system. TVA has a group of resource officers that work valley-wide. They do both natural and cultural resource protection, and they go out on the water. That's what Kenny's husband does. He works with TVA police. That is him right there. To protect archaeological sites on our property. So we have a really successful program. We do prosecute people. We've had a lot of prosecutions over the last 20 years. And it does work. It's not always perfect. Sometimes you just get a misdemeanor charge against somebody, but with ARPA, somebody's charged with the second was an automatic felony. Still not foolproof. I've had a case where an individual was found guilty of a felony, served jail time, went out and did it again, and then they went to a jury trial and they found him not guilty. So the judge decided to not mention that he was previously charged or previously convicted of ARPA violation, being in a grave. So unfortunately, we weren't able to prosecute him the second time, but we can. It's an automatic felony. But again, $500, really low threshold. All right, so I said a little bit about our tribal partners. TVA as a federal agency is required to consult with tribes on a government to government basis. They are sovereign nations. We have our representatives, we sit down with their representatives, and it's very different. They have a very special status in that consultation process. And since 2002, as I mentioned, we've learned a lot. Our consultation is not just send them a letter, we're gonna go do this, we're gonna go build this project. We meet with them regularly. We have face-to-face meetings annually. We have monthly phone calls where we talk about what's going on in our space. We update them on not just our projects, but where we are with ARPA, where we are with NAGPRA. They're our partners. They're not just somebody that we consult with. So we work with them to identify sites. We consult with them when we're going to go out and do a survey. Say this is what we're going to go do. These are our methods that we're going to use. Do you have any comments on this? And beyond that, we actually bring them in to help us with some of these tribal partnerships or tribal identification projects. They will come in and help do the field work with us. So we do a lot of non-invasive GPR, ground penetrating radar, magnetometer surveys now, because you can actually see a whole lot underground with this modern technology that you will never see if you dig a shovel test in the ground. So it's really great. Wish I had some photos. And they really like that technology because we're able to learn about the sites, know where there's potential burials, where there's big village sites, and we don't have to put a shovel in the ground. And then when we do, to ground truth these non-invasive excavations, we bring them in and have them help us. So this is an example of some of our tribal partners from the United Kituwa Band, which is a Cherokee tribe that lives in Oklahoma. So bring them and partner with them, work with them together. And in some cases, we help them get training and doing archaeological methods, and then we get training and learning about tribal perspectives at the same time. So it's been a great partnership. We've also been working with the tribes to increase tribal engagement, because I can stand up here in front of a group of people all day long and talk about the importance of archaeological sites to the tribes, but I will not have any meeting compared to a tribal person coming up and standing in front of this room and telling you what an archaeological site means to them. I just can't have that impact like they can. So we bring them into these communities and have them tell their story and have them tell the communities how it makes them feel when somebody loots one of their ancestors' graves. And it has had a profound impact on the community. So we bring them in, we bring them in and talk to our TVA management and our TVA staff, the people who are managing projects on TVA land, so that they understand the importance of making sure we're not impacting sites while we're doing projects. So that partnership and that engagement has been really important in getting people to really understand what these things mean to these tribal communities. Any questions?
How do you decide which tribal partners as far as the areas that you're in?
They tell us what counties and what states they're interested in. And we have a big database, and we'll go to this county and know how many tribes have interest in that county. So we have a list. And so if we're doing a project in that county, we'll send the notification out or consultation with all of those tribes. And if we have a field partnership, like some of these examples here, we'll invite all the tribes.
Now, the reason I was asking is you had Kituwa, you had one of the Kituwa representatives there. And being in the eastern, I was wondering how much you relate to, even on the eastern side, how much you relate to the Oklahoma tribes, Cherokee Nation.
How much we work with them?
Cherokee.
We work with any tribe that has an interest in the Tennessee Valley. There's 23 tribes right now that we work with. And they tell Cherokee Nation's one of them. There's 3 Cherokee tribes. There's a bunch of Creek tribal towns, Shawnee, the Osage Nation, the Delaware. I mean, like a lot of tribes. And we go to them and say, do you have an interest in the Tennessee Valley? They come back to us and say, we have an interest in these areas. So anytime we do anything in that area, they're involved in the conversation. So they tell us.
Federal tribes?
Huh?
Is that all federal tribes?
Yes.
That you work with? Y'all don't work with state tribes?
No. The federal tribes that we work with, and we're required to work with the federal tribes, but they don't want us to work with a lot of the state recognized tribes. And some state recognized tribes it's a sticky subject. Some state recognized tribes are, working on their federal recognition, and some state recognized tribes have 85,000 members. So, you know,
Does
there's
that
a,
make them a tribe because they have that many members?
huh?
You said some state tribes have 85,000 members.
Yes,
Does that make them a tribe?
evidently in some states. So that is something that they don't want us to work with. Those people do not have the same status.
I know who you're talking about. So
Okay. I'm not gonna name names. But they don't have the same status
That's
as
really
the
not,
Cherokee
not for
Nation.
this discussion, but I just.
It's a whole lengthy discussion that you could get into on that. And
Yes.
yeah, and it's complicated. It's very complicated, and some tribes really legitimately are trying to get state or federal recognition that have been struggling. So that's for another presentation that I'm probably not qualified to give.
Would want to.
But we work with them. These are some examples. This is the non-invasive survey that we did on an island in East Tennessee. The photo on the right is Painted Bluff, which is a rock art site located in on Wheeler Reservoir in North Alabama. It's an amazing site. It's an open air rock art site. We don't have very many of those in the East because of the preservation issues, but this one is pretty outstanding. That's LaDonna Brown of the Chickasaw Nation. She's actually helped us write a curriculum through Project Archaeology, which is used to be out of the Bureau of Land Management, but it's a teacher's curriculum that the Project Archaeology folks go out and teach workshops and bring in local teachers to teach archaeology in the school system. And she's helped us develop that curriculum. And I'm excited to say, going to be doing some more workshops next summer. So that's the best long-term solution that we have is getting to the students, the children, and teaching them when they're young the importance of why these sites are sacred, why these sites need to be protected. And so she's been really helpful in getting that off the ground. We also work with them for natural resource management. They have a really big interest in harvesting and collecting natural resources from their homelands that they can't get in Oklahoma because it doesn't grow there. So we've been working on river cane harvesting and looking into other types of natural resources that they're interested in that we can easily grow here in the valley. They can't, and then just allowing them to come and collect it, gather it, and take it home to make baskets and things that are important to their culture. Now, the whole point of my presentation, I finally got there. I was trying to lead up to the importance of the community outreach and the community engagement. The Thousand Eyes Archaeological Outreach Program was established in 2003, as I mentioned. It took a little while to get it up and running. It's amazing how hard it is to get an outreach program started. It's amazing how hard it is to get people in the communities to let you come talk to them sometimes. I would try to get into some of these communities to just, have a conversation about the looting problem, and I got shut down a lot. So if one thing that I have learned over the years is persistence, and just never give up and just keep pestering them and keep waiting for your time when somebody's going to get into a position and going to open up that door for you. Because in some of our communities, there were people who just outright hated TVA, hated the fact that we were stopping the looting problem on our land. It had been allowed for many years, and so there was a big angry group of people that were like loud in the community and didn't want us to come and be a part of it. So just waited and I bided my time. I would just go talk to other communities. But I'm very proud to say that persistence has paid off, and we have a lot of partnerships with some of these communities now, because we've got people in positions there that are supportive of what we're doing, and we're really growing an initiative to increase that awareness in some of these communities. I remember sitting at a table with somebody who was involved in local government and them telling me about somebody in their community who was digging archaeological sites. And they said, I don't think they were on TVA land. This was somebody involved in local politics. And that whole environment is gone. So things are changing. It's very slow. It's a very, very slow process. But the big thing is just having patience and going out and then talking in these communities, getting in the school systems, getting in the classroom, Even if a classroom just allows us to have 15 minutes of their time to talk to a group of 5-year-olds, we'll take it. 15 minutes. That's all we need. Maybe 15 minutes, and I will do what I can to be like, archaeology is cool, don't pick stuff up. It's all it takes. And then repeating it every year, going back to the same school groups and the same kids, and then just repeating that message. Doing fun activities, teaching them about Native American culture. When we can, bringing in travel representatives to talk to classrooms. That is like really hard to get, but when we get it, it's like golden. Like LaDonna Brown coming and talking to the teachers. It's the best opportunity that we have. It makes the greatest impact on the communities. Bringing in archaeologists to talk to the communities. Whenever we do an excavation for a project that has to be excavated because it can't be avoided, bringing in the public, having a public archaeology day, bringing them in, talking about it, having that messaging the whole entire time about how, hey, this is really cool, we're doing this excavation right here, and then always having that table that talks about looting is bad. You have to just keep hounding it and hounding it and hounding it until like you turn blue in the face. But it's necessary because the majority of the people in the communities don't realize that it's going on. A lot of people don't realize that it's not okay. They just don't think about it. It's not something that comes up in their daily lives, and they hear about it, and they you know, there's a large percentage of the population who don't even know that the tribes are still interested in this. They don't think they care. So getting out and talking about the fact that they still do care is a big, big part of our messaging. A Thousand Eyes Archaeological Program does a lot of different types of things. It's me going and talking to community groups like I'm doing today, going to festivals, Earth Day events, Bassmaster Classic, like expos, where you have like 30,000 people come to look at boats. What if people who are like have boats, they go out on the water, they're out on TVA reservoirs. If they see something, we're telling them what to do. They're just, again, it's just like 10 minutes of somebody's time, just making them aware of the problem is key. We've been trying to get involved with STEM programs. STEM is very big right now, so any way we can tie archaeology into STEM programs gets our foot in the door in the classrooms. We have some community partnerships where we're trying to work more closely with community groups. We had a speaker series in North Alabama for a while during COVID. We went virtual. We were reaching 40 or 50 people during an event, which may not seem like a lot, but it was always different people. So it's you're reaching a different group of people each time. We do articles and publications in local magazines, not professional publications. We've got to go out into the communities. What are the communities reading? Our local electric co-op has a magazine that comes out once a month. About once every year or two, we do an article in the electric co-op magazine talking about the importance of protecting sites. That reaches a massive amount of people. I know half the people will probably throw that magazine away, but I myself look at it for the recipes. So somebody's going to come across that article and read it. Signage, we try to do interpretive signage in places where people are going to access sites to learn more about it. I don't just do interpretive signage to talk about the site. I always have that messaging about protecting sites. Always have that messaging about the tribal connection to those sites, showing pictures of the tribes at the site, how they still care, how they're still coming back to their local communities. We work with TVA police to do saturation events where they have people on the water in uniform talking to people about how ARPA is out there and how it's illegal to do these activities. And then finally, my favorite part, our volunteer site stewardship program, which is my baby. It took me 12 years to start this program. Again, another example of persistence. In 2015, we kicked off a 2-day workshop, and it was in Guntersville, Alabama, and we had 4 participants. And that was it, and that was all it took. That's all I needed. We have a training program. There are, I don't know if you guys are familiar with, there's site stewardship programs in a lot of different states. Out west, there's a bunch of them. California has an amazing one. Arizona, Utah, Nevada, Florida. We borrowed a lot of things from these other site stewardship programs. Other site stewardship programs have borrowed things from us. It's like this network of people where we're sharing information, so we're not really having to reinvent the wheel. And the training material is a notebook where our participants will learn about federal laws that protect sites. They'll learn a little bit about archaeology. They'll learn a lot about safety, because safety is the most important thing. They'll get tribal perspectives, because we always have a tribal instructor be a part of our teaching program and bring somebody in from the tribes. If we can't get somebody there in person now, if anything good came out of COVID, it's like the ability to be able to do virtual components and things like we're doing here today. We can bring in a tribal person virtually to talk to them if we can't get one in person. Right? Best is to have them in person, because the participants in this training think that's like one of the best parts of this whole entire program. And they have a whole day in the classroom where they learn about all these things. We do require that they fill out an application first. We do background checks on them. Maybe because I don't trust people, but you know, we don't want somebody to get into this program who has a history of theft or ARPA violations, because we're going to be giving them location information to archaeological sites on public land. So it's restricted information. So we have to have people, we have to build that trust. They also have to sign confidentiality waivers and all sorts of paperwork. And then we take them out in the field and we do a whole fun set of exercises where they go out and get to visit a real archaeological site. But then we run them through a series of exercises of what it's like to be a site monitor. So we have these mock archaeological sites that they go and practice, you know, collecting their data in the field. And then we make them go hide behind the bushes, and then they come back to their site a second time and it's been dug up. And they have to practice what they would do if they came to their site and it's been excavated. They have to practice their skills that they learned in the training the day before. And then the third time they come back to their site, there's a person in it. You have a fake looter at the site. And then they get to practice what they would do if they were ever out in the field and ran across somebody who was looting, because that's actually a possibility. How to record certain information to get it back to TVA police, like what are they wearing? What is their vehicle number? Things like that. So it's a really fun exercise. It's really helpful when we have fun people as the fake looters, because it makes it a lot more entertaining. We've been able to train over 60 volunteers since 2015. It's been a very slow growing program. We've learned a lot. We're still learning. Volunteers are challenging sometimes when you're spread across 7 states, to retain them, to make them continually interested in the program. But I'm excited to say that we had our first chapter in Florence, Alabama, where we have had 3 trainings and a group of volunteers that are very active there, and a chapter coordinator who works with those people so that TVA doesn't always have to be there all the time, because we're not in Florence, Alabama, so we can't be there. So the program's growing. It's a great opportunity to learn about archaeology, to participate, be a part. If anybody's interested, let me know. We probably aren't going to have a training in this town, even though this is a really cool town and I want to come back.
You're most welcome.
But if anybody's interested in even starting a program like this, or learning more about how to start a program like this, we are always happy to share information, because I really think that this is a very critical thing that we do to work with communities to get them engaged. These people become our ambassadors in the local community. They go out, even if they don't ever go monitor their sites, they're still going out in their local communities and they're talking about what they learned in that class. And every little bit counts, and spreading the word on the importance of why we protect these sites. And I think that's it. I know I talked a lot about things before I got to the Thousand Eyes program, but I wanted to give you guys an idea of the issues that we face and the problems that we have and why we have this program. So happy to take any questions that you guys have, or stay around as long as you guys need me to. Yes.
So how do you deal with, I don't know what I guess, there's a lot of rituals that deal with the American burial sites. So how do you deal with the
don't have superstitions, but the superstitions that go, that follow it, that are around it.
Like with the tribes or us as archaeologists. And when one thing that we do when we do our partnerships with the tribes is that some of them have opened up to us about some of the things that they do for cleansing before and after they go into a site. And we have been doing more of that when a tribe has been willing to do that with us, because we have to do reburials sometimes. We have to help them. A lot of times they want to do it themselves, and they do their ceremonies and things. It's going to vary by tribe. They're all different. But every once in a while they have let us help them, or open us into their circle of trust. And we've been a part of some of it. So haven't done that a whole lot. For the most part, when we find a burial, which doesn't happen as often as, fortunately doesn't happen as often as it could, we notify them. We don't have anything that we do specifically, but then we'll go and do a reburial or whatever. We'll bring the tribes in and do that. It'll be up to whatever tribe takes the lead on that. So they do have things that they prefer. Certain tribes, they don't want women to be doing the work for reasons that are justifiable, because women give life, and exposure to somebody who has passed is not considered healthy. It's not considered healthy for any of them. If you've ever had the opportunity to hear a tribal archaeologist talk about what they have to go through when they have to do a reburial, it's very powerful. It's very hard for them. It's very emotional. They have to go back into their community, and there are people in their community that don't want to have anything to do with them because of what they have had to do. So because of their traditional beliefs when it comes to exposing themselves to human remains. So there are a lot of things associated with that some of them won't have anything to do with it. Some of them won't want to go anywhere near a site that has a known burial in it, and that's fine. So there are a lot of things that we have to consider when we have our tribal partnerships, and letting them know what could be out there, what to be prepared for, because it's very hard for them in most cases.
Growing up in the area, the Chattanooga area, you hear a lot of this story, especially in Jack, around the chicken market, Hell's Bar. So that's why I was curious about that, because there's, oh my gosh, so much that I grew up with stories of things that I was.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not privy to everything, so I don't know all of the different types of things that they have to go through, but I know that it's very hard for them, and they're not all comfortable talking about that with the public, and some of them have been opening up to the community and the public. They've been opening up to archaeologists, which is their first hurdle, because archaeologists have been excavating remains for years and years and years, and that's been a huge source of attention. So talking to archaeologists about how that makes them feel, and archaeologists hearing that for the first time, who've been in the field for 30 years, is extremely powerful. I mean, the field of archaeology is changing rapidly, and it's changing rapidly because of our involvement with the tribes. So, which is a good thing. I mean, this is the community that many people have spent years and years studying, and you need to get them involved in that. This is, otherwise, what is the point of your research? So I don't know if I answered the question.
I have a couple more, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Do you have a rough estimate of how many ancestors in sacred objects are still living anymore?
That are still where?
In inventory.
I don't have it off the top of my head. We have repatriated everything that we know that we've had in our possession. We're going through the process now of making sure that we have everything in that inventory, because the inventories were done by archaeologists, not tribal representatives. So we need to go back and make sure that there aren't things that we missed. And they're also waiting on adequate land for reburial. So a lot of stuff that's been transferred, the control is transferred to the tribe, and the tribes could actually take it if they wanted it. They're actually waiting on us to make a safe and secure location available for them to be reburied. So we still have a lot of work in that space, but we've made a lot of progress in the last 5 to 10 years. And it's been slow across the country, but we are doing our best to make sure that when we do rebuild this, that all the people and all of their belongings are returned with them. So, and that's very important to the tribes. They don't want something to be left behind that belongs with that person. So that's where we're at now.
Thank you. And another question was, you mentioned the use of LiDAR, and then you also mentioned the use of other technology. But has TVA done anything with LiDAR like has been done in South America? You know, with the identification of the vast
The big
Mayan
monuments.
networks and stuff. I've always thought this area would be a fruitful area if it was utilized.
We have started. We have not done it to the extent they've done it in South America, and we don't have like the same monumental earthworks that they have in South America, that the Mayans have here, but
That we know of.
that we know of,
They
but we
look
have
like-
found.
look like hills.
We have used it and inadvertently discovered, we actually have one of our volunteers with our volunteer site stewardship program was looking at the state's LiDAR data, that's available online, found like an enclosure in the LiDAR, and we didn't know it was there, and I think it was even in a place that some people had been to, but LiDAR shows stuff that you can't see when you're walking across the surface. So we were able to we have to go back out and ground truth it. We're gonna send a more like a drone out there this winter when the leaves are off, because this other LiDAR was not really high resolution. So we're gonna go out there with a higher resolution and collect some data first with the leaves off, and then go back out and ground truth it. So we've been testing it for finding mounds, like stone cairns, stone features, very common. Especially they're very common in Georgia, very common in Tennessee Valley, but they're very small. So is this LiDAR mounted drone effective in identifying these smaller mounds on the ground surface? Because you can't see them sometimes if you're just walking across the woods, because leaf litter, trees down, it's just not very obvious. So LiDAR can help us see stuff that we can't see otherwise when we're standing in front of it. So it's new, we just started, but we definitely think it's effective. And we hope to do more of it. It's just very, like we don't have access to our own drone pilot where he could just go out all winter and do all the work that we want him to do. So we have to select projects for him, but they're very excited about it because it's a totally new application for them and the use of drone technology. So they love it. They actually bought a boat just so they could go out and look at some of the land that we have. So the long answer to your question is yes, but on a small scale, and hoping to expand it, because it's just, the same with the ground penetrating radar and the magnetometer, which you just run over the surface. If you do a whole swath of an area, you can see an entire village. And it's amazing. And you don't have to do any damage to the site. You can see palisaded walls, you can see house floors, sometimes you can kind of get an idea of where the grades are so that you can avoid them. It's a great management tool for like if you're going to be doing a project or there's farming activity that's going on out there, is where do we need to avoid to avoid impacting sites, and you never have to stick a shovel in the ground. So
that's great. I'm delighted that you're using it, because I think we don't know what's beneath the surface.
no, and I mean I've seen some things that have just totally changed my mind, because when I first started looking at it, I was an old school archaeologist for a long time. I thought, there's no way that's not gonna, until I saw it. And there were palisades that had bastions on them. And when we did some ground truthing with the tribes involved, we excavated those areas and did not see it. you couldn't see it.
It's a landscape.
You could only see it, yeah, you could only see it with the GPR, so it was like it was just so subtle with the soils that you couldn't see it, so it's just opened up all sorts of possibilities for us in looking at sites on a large scale, and just not having to impact things that shouldn't be impacted, so, yeah. I would do that anytime I could as a first step before I do any excavation. So, especially in known sites, it doesn't always, it's not cheap, so.
Many of the counties in Georgia have their own LiDAR, not LiDAR, but, well, yeah, the mapping, capability and some of them include LiDAR. I don't know whether it's general with the states of the Southeast or not, but I'm not even sure that it's available in all counties, but I know there are some counties up here in North Georgia that do have pretty good LiDAR coverage.
Yeah, they have it in Alabama and Tennessee too. The quality of it varies,
Yeah,
varies
I'm
by
sure.
and it's usually an airplane mounted drone, so it's,
Way up there.
it's way up there. And, I know that, and I think it's, I can't remember if it's Alabama or Tennessee, but the data was collected in 2011, and so it's old. And in today's standards, like 2011 data, has just been, completely surpassed with modern technology. So, it's great that they have that. It's a great start, but then that could help us like narrow down the field and say, because that enclosure that our volunteer found was from that state's data, and it was, and when we are able to fly it with the higher resolution drone LiDAR, then we should be able to see a lot more. So, and we don't know what it is. We don't know if it's Native American, if it's Civil War. That there still has to be some level of going and putting your boots on the ground to be able to confirm what it is. But you can narrow down your impacts this way and reduce your footprint. And then you can it's just basically doing archaeology smarter. You're not taking away from the need for excavation, but you're reducing your impacts to the site, and you're narrowing your scope, so where you're just doing the bare minimum to get the data. A lot of archaeology is just clearing sites. Like, before we had this technology, we didn't know what was under the ground. So this really opens up a lot of avenues for archaeology.
You've talked a lot about technology changes in the last 20 or 25 years. I was a forest archaeologist for the Chattahoochee-Oconee National Forest for 21 years. And toward the end of that time, when we attempted to contact the tribes, we'd send messages, letters to the leadership of the various tribes. We almost never got a response. There was not a matter of cooperation like you're talking about. There was barely any recognition that we were there or that they were there. So that's the major step forward that's happened in your management time, which I think is outstanding.
It's the last 20 years. I mean, don't give me any credit. This isn't me. It's the tribes that have driven that. Like, we had our first face-to-face consultation meeting because they want face-to-face consultation.
Sure.
Letters are not consultation. So we had a meeting. That meeting ended up being not at all what we expected, and it completely changed how we do consultation going forward. And we continually grown from that over the years and learned from that and learned from those experiences, on what not to do, what works, what doesn't work. But we were the same. We would send a letter, didn't hear anything in 30 days because that's what the letter of the law says, but that's not consultation to the tribe. So you have to have that contact. You have to have those relationships regularly, not just when there's a problem, but build those relationships up before you have a problem. So when there is a problem, you can pick up the phone and call them, and they know you, and you have to build that trust. We're still building that trust.
I've noticed that in my Forest Service colleagues, in the time since I left the forest in 2000, the archaeologists who worked in the various states develop those kinds of, rapport with the tribal, town councils and tribal depots. So that, they were on telephone, call them, talk to them type thing, or get together in a room somewhere, or in a field.
Mhm.
It's my impression is that the depot for the Cherokee, Eastern Cherokee band is a really outstanding individual who's really good about getting along with federal agencies.
I
In
went to
fact,
school
I
with
think
him.
he has a degree in anthropology, I think.
Yes, he's an archaeologist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I think it's changed dramatically and for the good.
It has.
I'm glad you could.
Yeah, and they have more tribal archaeologists that they're getting trained and they're going to school and getting degrees and stuff. And, you know, a lot of tribes still have to hire non-tribal archaeologists, but we're bringing in their own people now and getting them in graduate school and going through these programs. But unfortunately, there's still a lot of taboo with some of the tribes about archaeology.
Yeah,
So
well,
it's hard to find archaeologists who want to go into the field because there's just been a disconnect over the years for obvious reasons in some cases. So, but I mean, the Eastern Band actually has multiple tribal archaeologists now.
no good.
Are you familiar with the work that's being done at Western Carolina University for the benefit of the Eastern Band? It's archaeology for Indians, not about Indians.
Yeah.
And some wonderful work
Yes.
is being done, and most of the archaeologists are not native. However, they have developed real respect for the culture that they're studying, and it's a delightful thing to see and such a change.
Yes. Yes, they have a great program. Some of the Eastern Band archaeologists are come out of it.
Some of those, like you pointed out, were actually Cherokee Nation, but they're in the Eastern Band, they're working with the Eastern Band, and that's where they're at.
Yeah, Russ Townsend, who's the tribal preservation officer.
Yeah,
from
he's
Cherokee
Cherokee
Nation.
Nation.
Yeah. I went to school with
We
him.
kind of make that difference because Eastern Band's been here all along. Cherokee Nation is mostly the removal tribe. So, you know, that's when people talk and you hear a lot about Eastern Band. Well, Eastern Band's been there. They weren't removed. But
Yeah.
but even though we have family in all three tribes.
Well, and
Most
you know, a lot
do.
of people would work with the Eastern Band, but they wouldn't work with the Cherokee Nation. So federal agencies are getting better about including all the tribes. that
Yeah,
have
that's the reason, because when you're talking actually Georgia and you're talking Tennessee, you're talking Cherokee Nation.
Yeah,
You know, and of course Catawba too, but I mean, that's in the Eastern Band because it's the family ties between all three.
yes.
We're trying to learn to work better together too.
Yeah, I mean, this is a constant
Among
process.
ourselves, I mean, we're trying to work better together.
I'm never gonna get up here and say we figured this out.
Yeah.
It's a learning process, and we're always gonna be learning and growing from it, and being better stewards of these sites as a result.
That's the
Because
main thing.
these are not our sites. We're just the stewards of these sites for other people, and so it's not about what TVA wants. It's about, the people who these sites are important to.
What you was talking about, my daughter went to the University of North Dakota, and she was in a RAIN program there, which deals with nursing, American Indians in nursing, and she was out on the Ojibwe. A lot of times they have to put grave watchers out when somebody dies, because I mean, it's not just archaeology, it's even, because of some of the things that's buried with.
Yeah, that's sad.
It is,
So it's and there's a population of people that are just gonna go and do that to any grave, doesn't matter who it is. And then there's a population of people who go out and do it with Native American graves because they don't think Native Americans are still around. It's a little bit of a component of it's racism. Like they don't, it's racism. So that's the importance of, making sure people understand that there's no difference between these graves and any other grave. They're somebody's ancestors and they need to be left alone. So it's unfortunate that we have to still teach that. We have to go in and say that, but we do. And probably will have to do it always.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Aaron.